Welcome to this podcast titled Scientific Papers. This is episode 1, and it's on reading strategies. Typically after the abstract of a paper, scientific journal articles follow the IMRD format. The introduction is followed by the methods, which are followed by the results and the discussion. These parts of a paper can be packed with information. Lots of papers are not very well written, which makes them extremely difficult to read. Because of this difficulty, it's important to create a workflow for reading these papers. The abstract of a paper will state the purpose or the rationale of the study. This will answer the question why. It will also summarize the methodology as how the researchers went about conducting this study. The abstract will summarize the results, the what behind the paper, and the conclusion, which will kind of be what does this all mean? It'll explain the meaning of the paper in the broader sense. Next, it may be helpful for you to look at visuals like graphs and tables to see if you can make sense of some of the data that was collected. The introduction of the paper will usually serve as the hook. It will probably give a lot of background information and will move from very broad information to more specific information until it finally hits the focal point of the study. The methods section will be next. This section will explain what experiments were done to answer the specific question or questions that were stated in the introduction section. This part may in fact be the most difficult to read and understand. The results section will include statements of what was found during the study. Most of the graphs, tables, figures will be found in this section. The discussion section will typically place the work that was done in the particular study in the context of the broader field of science. It will provide clear answers to the questions posed in the introduction and also probably explain how the results support or reject the hypothesis or hypotheses. So here are 2 important tips before beginning to actually read a scientific paper. First of all, don't read the paper in a linear fashion. And secondly, ask questions as you are reading. After you find a particular journal article for a project or paper, you should actively scan it. Try to understand the big picture. You can do this by looking at the title, the keywords, the abstract. Look at the date of the paper to get a sense of how long ago it was written. Try to understand why the researchers published the paper, and make a note of any unknown terms to look up later. Here's an example. The first thing I might do is to look at the title. Recovering Aspen followed changing elk dynamics in Yellowstone, evidence of a trophic cascade. So let's say maybe I know that aspen is a type of tree and that elk, well, that's a type of animal, but I have no clue what a trophic cascade is. I would make a note of that to look up later. Next, I'll look at a keyword section. Usually the keywords are found underneath the abstract, but I would highlight any unknown words and add those to my list of terms. I'd probably read the abstract next, looking for the big picture and the answer to the question why. Why did they conduct this research? Finally, I'll look at the date, which will tell me again how historical or recent this article is. It would also be good to scan the introduction section to get a better understanding of the background and also to identify other unknown words. Let's say I scan through this and I see that the word trophic cascade again, so I make a note that that word may be important. I also see words like ungulate, riparian, non-riparian, and predation. And so I add those to my list of unknown terms. So scanning is the first step in reading a scientific journal article. The second step would be rereading sections to attempt to answer more in-depth questions such as, what's the problem the research is trying to solve? Are the findings supported by evidence? Is the sample size representative of a larger population? Are the experiments repeatable? Is the research unique? What are the practical implications of the research findings? You'll have to look at the introduction again as well as the other sections, such as methods, results, and discussion, to answer these more in-depth questions. The third step is to try to interpret the graphs and tables and figure out how they relate to the issues and findings that can be found in the results and discussion sections. Here's an example of a figure showing 4 graphs from the paper we've been looking at. Look at how the y-axis and x-axis are both labeled. Read the caption to try to understand what the graphs are stating. This is all a part of data analysis and trying to get it in your head straight as to what these authors are talking about and finding out about. The last thing you should do is summarize the paper. Write down any notes that may help you remember the main ideas. If you have a physical copy of the paper, highlight and write on it. Hopefully these ideas and suggestions will help you. Thanks for listening to this Scientific Papers podcast, Episode 1, Reading Strategies.